There is a rumor going around that Qatar's sovereign wealth fund is looking to allocate to Bitcoin, or looking to allocate in a massive way. And Bitcoin's price, perhaps in part to this news, is pumping quite a lot. We're up to 43.7K. Again, this is Qatar's sovereign wealth fund with rumors of $500 billion worth of Bitcoin. This is a rumor from Max Keiser. So in this video, I'm going to break down my personal opinions and thoughts on this rumor, the implications for Bitcoin's price in the short term and the long term, and ultimately what the big important takeaway for you, an actionable step from this video is. So without further ado, what is the rumor? Is there any validity? And why is Max Keiser saying this? I do not think this is going to happen, personally, at least not for the near term. Long term, I do think it will happen, and I will get to why I think that's the case. But first, we have to talk about who Max Keiser is. He's the guy that has been addressing this. Max Keiser is a Bitcoin OG. He made his first presentation in Prague in 2011 when Bitcoin was just a few dollars. Max owns tens and tens and tens of thousands of Bitcoin. In fact, back in the early days of Bitcoin, Max Keiser was giving out as a gift 10,000 Bitcoin to various people, various famous internet personalities, in a way to get them to talk about Bitcoin and have a vested interest in Bitcoin. Back in the early days, Max gifted Alex Jones 10,000 Bitcoin, roughly worth, what is that, $300 million? $430 million in today's purchasing power. So Max gifted Alex and many others 10,000 Bitcoin many years ago. And just recently, he went on a show with Alex Jones to offer him again 10,000 Bitcoin, and Alex Jones, of course, lost the quiz. He didn't know a single answer to the questions. I don't understand. I mean, they were super simple questions, 5 easy questions. I knew the answers. Many of you watching probably knew the answers. I don't know why Alex Jones wouldn't even take an hour and study Bitcoin, because he could have made $430 million just from Max giving it to him in a massive publicity stunt. But oh well, it didn't happen. So anyway, point being, Max has quite a strong personality and has quite the track record for giving out massive amounts of Bitcoin and for making really bold predictions. A lot of his predictions have come true, one of them being El Salvador. The other ones, not so much. So it's really hit or miss, very fitting to anyone that makes super bold predictions and very specific timelines. But again, people take Max really seriously because he's been around since 2011 and because he is basically the right-hand man for El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin. This is a picture of Max and Mr. Bukele, President Bukele, here on his birthday, joking about them downgrading El Salvador's bonds because they spent money on a Bitcoin cake. So anyway, all that to say is that Max has a lot of pull when he says something. And so when he says something like this, that Qatar's sovereign wealth fund is looking to allocate $500 billion worth of capital to Bitcoin, that perks a lot of ears, because we're like, holy cow, if Max is talking about this when he was talking about El Salvador, 3, 4, or 5 years ago, could there be something here? So without further ado, what is the math behind what Bitcoin's price could be if that were to happen? So I broke this down in a recent tweet that got a lot of attention, got a couple 100,000 views. But basically I broke this down saying that the rumor of Qatar's sovereign wealth fund wanting a Bitcoin allocation wanting a $500 billion Bitcoin allocation. Now, for context, Michael Saylor owns about 17,000 Bitcoin. So this allocation today at today's prices, which again is changing really rapidly already since this tweet, Bitcoin's up 4.6%. So this has already changed quite a bit. But just for context, $500 billion is 671 times more than Saylor's disclosed position of 17,000 Bitcoin. And so, of course, the inherent problem here is that there's only $76 billion worth of Bitcoin remaining on exchanges. At the time of recording, there's roughly 1.77 million Bitcoin on exchanges at roughly 43,000 bucks a pop. That's about $76 billion. Actually, it's a little bit more than that since Bitcoin's price has gone up. But point being, if you have $500 billion of inflowing liquidity chasing only $76 billion of Bitcoin remaining on exchanges, what's going to happen here? A lot of people have not really understood the implications of this. People say, oh, wait, how will they buy if there are no more coins? Oh, they just won't be able to buy. They won't be able to do it. I don't understand what's going to happen to Bitcoin's price. Will Bitcoin break? Will they have to issue more Bitcoins? Okay, you may think I'm crazy in saying that, but those are legitimate questions. I've heard those questions in the last 24 hours. People are like, wait, if they can't buy more Bitcoin, how are we going to issue enough Bitcoin in order for them to get? And it's like, no, that's the whole point. The whole point is that you have an immovable supply. You have an immovable amount of Bitcoin. You have a fixed supply. And so when you have increasing demand coming in, the only movable thing is price. See, I'm in a house right now. The problem with using a house or a bar of gold or a barrel of oil as a store of value is that these supplies are not immovable. They are not immutable. They can be changed. If the demand for houses were to go up, if $500 billion were to flow into the housing market demanding houses, well, then that individual has communicated to the market that the value for houses should be increasing. And so therefore people have a greater incentive, a greater free market incentive to build more houses, produce more housing, which then forces the housing prices to go down because you've increased supply. And that's what makes Bitcoin so different. And that's why you should never underestimate Bitcoin's potential upside action here, is because we have never in human history seen an asset with a fixed supply schedule, meaning that it is extremely sensitive to shifts in demand, both to the upside and to the downside. Now, over time, the demands to the upside, the increasing demand, typically always over a long enough time horizon, outweighs the departure of demand. So point being that no, more Bitcoins are not going to be mined to make the Saudis and the Qataris and others happy, right? These sovereign wealth funds, they're not going to be able to print more Bitcoins. They're not going to be able to do that in the same way you could do with oil or houses or whatever. This is why, by the way, that these countries, these Middle Eastern countries, have gotten so rich by controlling the oil. It's because if you can control the supply of oil, you can control the entirety of oil, because you can manipulate oil prices up or down based on changing the supply of oil that you're distributing onto the market. If you want to crash oil prices, you can do that. If you want to make oil more valuable, you can do that. Simply artificially hold oil, give a little bit of oil out, increase the demand for oil, the value for oil, and make your oil worth more, borrow against it, etc. So it's the same thing with diamond companies. The diamonds and engagement rings and wedding rings, these things aren't actually scarce. It's just that these diamond companies go out and pay people in Africa, unfortunately, child labor, blood diamonds, all these things. They pay people to dig them out of the ground, to take them and put them into a vault, so that once they're there, they can store and protect monetary premium. And this is why, by the way, as a humanitarian case, the best and fastest way to demonetize these blood diamonds and demonetize these horrible atrocities, particularly in Africa and Southeast Asia, is to demonetize these assets entirely. Don't have the diamonds be artificially scarce. Don't have the real estate be artificially scarce and force housing prices to go up. Instead, have Bitcoin absorb this monetary premium. I've made my point there. So back to the Qataris. So if there are no more coins, and this is the whole point, that with immovable supply, the only thing that can happen is price moves instead. This means that if the Qataris were going to buy $500 billion of Bitcoin for the remaining 1.77 million Bitcoin on exchanges, that price would probably skyrocket. Now, again, I think this is a rumor. I like Max. I met Max both in Miami in 2023 as well as El Salvador in 2023. This is a picture of me interviewing Max and Stacy on stage about the progress of El Salvador, and El Salvador having a great rebranding in the last few years, going quickly becoming the shining beacon of Latin America. So I like these guys. I've met them. I think they genuinely care about the mission, both about number go up for price as well as the humanitarian components of Bitcoin as well. But again, Max has quite a strong personality and likes to make bold predictions. And in my opinion, I'll believe it when I see it when it comes to this. $500 billion is a lot of money, especially when the whole market cap for Bitcoin is only $800 billion. That's a lot of money, okay? And I don't think most people the people that are thinking that this is a high likelihood now, I don't think realize just how much money it is. So again, maybe it's true, maybe it's partially true, but until it's happened, I think it's pure speculation. I think in all likelihood, it would not be 500 billion. Number one, it wouldn't be that much in my opinion. If it were to happen, it'd probably be over many years. It's not going to be a smash buy all at once, and it would not be instant liquidity. And again, if it happens at all, I don't know. I've not seen any paperwork. I haven't seen any documentation. Again, I just want to say this is a rumor. This has not happened yet. However, I do think these things will eventually occur, and I do think it's really important. And the reason is because everyone talks about, oh, wow, $500 billion is so much money. It's ridiculous to think that'll ever be added to Bitcoin. But the U.S. adds $500 billion in unfunded liabilities every 2 weeks. Let me say that again. The U.S. adds $500 billion of unfunded liabilities, money and debt obligations we inherently have no plan to pay every 2 weeks. So my point being that, yeah, I don't think $500 billion from the Qataris is coming to Bitcoin anytime soon. But every 2 weeks, we're just creating an extra amount of debt obligations that's going to require that liquidity injection at some point in the future. Okay, the Louisiana purchase was for what, tens of millions of dollars? I think it was like $12 million, the Louisiana purchase. Okay, like the entire national debt of the US was once in the single-digit millions, then the double-digit millions, then the hundreds of millions and billions, and now we're in the tens of trillions here. A couple decades ago, it was only just a couple $1 trillion. But my point being that if we've gone from millions to billions to trillions, next is quadrillions, then quintillions, we're adding $500 billion of unfunded liabilities every 2 weeks. At some point, a $500 billion allocation to Bitcoin, let alone any asset, is not going to be absurd. It's going to be inevitable. Imagine telling someone from 100, 150 years ago that a house price was, $300,000, or someone would ever pay 800 grand for a house. They'd say, who are they? Rockefeller? Like, it would be completely unimaginable. And so my point being that in a long enough time horizon, these kinds of allocations will not just be the once in a blue moon major sovereign wealth fund allocating. It will be a regular occurrence. Okay. Michael Saylor was only the beginning for Wall Street. Okay. Michael Saylor dwarfs people like me, dwarfs people like you, almost certainly. Maybe not Max Keiser, but besides a handful of people that were the very early days people to Bitcoin, Michael Saylor dwarfs all of us. Because we're talking he has a $2 billion Bitcoin profit. That's massive. But a $2 billion Bitcoin profit is very different from sovereign wealth funds that have tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars at their disposal. So in the same way that Michael Saylor dwarfs you or I, in many ways, these sovereign wealth funds dwarf the billionaires like Saylor. Okay. Now, and because, by the way, that $2 billion profit is including MicroStrategy, and Michael Saylor is not the sole shareholder of MicroStrategy. So, so anyway, my point being that debasement funds, dwarfs these sovereign wealth funds. In the same way that a $500 billion sovereign wealth fund is probably happening nowhere anytime soon because it's so much bigger than Saylor. In the same way, eventually it will happen because debasement dwarfs those funds. $500 billion as a once a decade allocation from a single sovereign wealth fund will be dwarfed by all the governments printing money perpetually in the future. And ultimately, technological deflation even dwarfs that. That's the thing people forget, but that's dwarfs even printing money, because the faster we have technologically continue, the farther prices fall down, because again, we're creating more and more supply, meaning again, prices come down faster and faster as we produce more houses, more gold, more oil, more diamonds, whatever, meaning that we have to make up for that difference with debased capital, with debased currency units, to make up for that difference to preserve credit markets. And we will always vote to debase our currency for the sake of preserving credit markets. So actually, the even bigger driver of gains for Bitcoin is not going to be debasement or hyperinflations or major inflationary events across the world. It's going to be the technological progress that we see. And that's really the price appreciation you want. You don't want Bitcoin to go to $1 million just because the currency fell. You want Bitcoin to go to $1 million in purchasing power, quote unquote, in terms of that technology that we're having more and more prosperous lives from. So when do I think is going to happen? Do I think it's going to happen anytime soon? And $500 billion is about to be smash bought to Bitcoin? No, absolutely not. I do not think this is the case. I think this is one of the more fringe rumors out there. Could it happen partially? Yeah, maybe. Maybe what they could do is they could buy $5 billion of Bitcoin, which would again be a huge allocation, like Saylor level allocation here. They could buy 5 billion, which is only 1% of the rumor. But as they do that, price goes up. As price goes up, that 5 billion turns into 7 billion, 8 billion, 10, 12 billion dollars of value. Well, all of a sudden, they don't need necessarily $500 billion of capital because of the market multiplier and because market cap is downstream of price. In the same way, both you and I, we're trying to buy Bitcoin so that it goes up in value over time. We may have an increasing percentage allocation to Bitcoin indefinitely. People today have 90% allocations to Bitcoin, not because they took 90% of their cash and bought Bitcoin, but because they took a smaller percentage of their cash or the liquidity, bought Bitcoin, that Bitcoin became more valuable. So then when they buy more, it becomes the value appreciates so much that eventually it becomes that allocation. And so obviously the rumor is a little bit vague for this purpose. It doesn't really make clear, is this going to be a $500 billion smash bot that they want $500 billion liquidity for, or is it just going to be that they want a $500 billion mark allocation? If they want a $500 billion mark, maybe they don't need $500 billion of capital. They may not even need $50 billion of capital, So point being, I think it's a little vague for that reason, but and I'll get to that more in a second. But are exchanges draining alarmingly rapidly? Yes, they absolutely are. Again, this is Bitcoin's price here on CoinMarketCap. It's live, 43.7K. We can see it's gone up quite a bit, about 5%. in the day. Let's see, in the last week, it's gone up about 14%. So in other words, the dollar's fallen, you know, a little over 10%. It's fallen about 20% in the last month. The dollar has, but the volume, this massive volume that you see here, in this gray at the bottom here. Okay, we're talking about like 800,000 coins being exchanged between hands in the last 24, 36, 48 hours here. Like we're looking at almost 1 million coins, aka easily half, well over half of all the coins remaining on exchanges are trading hands. Okay, that's a lot of volume. And these coins, they are trending down over time. Okay, again, if we look at the balance of Bitcoin on exchanges here, I can pull this up real quick. Okay, obviously Binance is the #1 exchange. They claim to have 499,000 Bitcoin. If we look at a chart here over time, you can see in the orange line here, Bitcoin price going up, and to the right, and we can see Bitcoin balances going to the right and down. This is the first time that we're having the beginning of a Bitcoin bull market while exchange balances are going down. This is really important. Exchange balances are going down. So are the Qataris about to buy? I don't know, maybe partially. I highly doubt 500 billion. I highly doubt 5 billion even. But the point is that these exchanges are draining, and all it takes is one sovereign wealth fund, any of them, to basically instantly buy 10%, 30%, 50%, if not the entirety of remaining Bitcoin on exchanges. It could theoretically happen. So is $100 million per Bitcoin bullish? No, I don't think so. I really genuinely believe that this is not bullish in a long enough time horizon, because what happens when it's not just us 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 2,000 little weird Bitcoiners out there in our, you know, internet circle? What happens when it's 5% of the global population, 5% of the globe's sovereign wealth funds, 5% of the debasing dollars, 5% of the world instead has this conviction of Bitcoin? They're buying Bitcoin and doing everything they can to acquire as much as they can and dump every other asset as fast as possible. What happens is it just keeps going up, because the only thing that can change is price. Supply can't change, and so the only movable variable becomes that price. Like I've made that point. And so this goes back to a video I made recently, I think it was about a couple months ago, about how Bitcoin could get to $500 million per Bitcoin with a mere 2% global allocation. Now, is that going to be exactly true? No, I don't think so. I don't think you can take that to quote unquote the bank, to use an ancient phrase there. But the point being that it takes very small percentages to get very large numbers. Obviously, as people liquidate other assets, the market caps of those assets go down. And likewise, the multiplier effect that I used in that video is probably actually bearish. I actually think it's really, really conservative. But point being, one way or another, even though I don't believe this rumor in particular is likely correct, I do believe Bitcoin at 42,000 when I tweeted this yesterday, or now today at nearly $44,000 per Bitcoin. Point being, at this level, I think in many ways it is just as cheap as it was in $42. Okay, when Bitcoin is 5 million, when Bitcoin's 500,000, even when it's 50 million, 500 million, or 5 billion, when it's at some major price level, people aren't going to care whether you bought it at $22,000 or $44,000 or $42 or $800 or whatever. They're just going to be amazed that, wow, you own a whole coin. Wow, you own 10 million sats. Wow, you own 500 million sats. He's a sat billionaire. That's crazy. You know, likewise, if I tell you Max Keiser has 10,000 Bitcoin, 30,000 Bitcoin, 50, 80, 100,000 Bitcoin, to you, emotionally, it's all the same, and you're not going to care. You know, Max Keiser had the same lifestyle today, and it doesn't matter if he only has 20,000 coins or if he has 100,000 coins. He still has the same quality lifestyle. And likewise for you, in many ways, I don't think it even really matters that you didn't buy Bitcoin at $42 many, many years ago. Like, in many ways, if your time horizon is long enough, it could have a very similar impact on you. Obviously, you may not have the same amount of USD purchasing power behind you, but if the goal is to have a higher standard of living and a better, more prosperous life for the future, in many ways, Bitcoin is still dirt cheap, as if it was 1,000 times cheaper in fiat terms as it was right now. Now, a lot of people didn't understand this. Like I said, shoot, goodness, this tweet's already got, 250,000 views. That's crazy. It's almost got as many views as the original tweet I screenshotted here. Well, that's just a screenshot, so it's not quite accurate. But anyway, here's the video. It's entitled 500 million Bitcoin. Here's the math. You can find it on YouTube. I posted that a few weeks ago. A lot of people made the correct point that the fund itself does not have $500 billion in AUM. Yes, this is true. I understand that. I can do a Google search. I'm well aware of that. Many other people commented on that before I made this tweet. But the larger point, again, is that you don't have to have a $500 billion, you don't have to have $500 billion in cash to eventually get to a $500 billion allocation, right? You don't need $300,000 of cash to get to a $300,000 real estate exposure, right? And a lot of people seem to not understand that. I'll just go through some of the comments and comment on that. Point being with rumors, I think it's intentionally vague for that reason. Here's another one commenting on that point about lack of AUM. I make this point. There's another one. Yeah, most of these comments are actually, yeah, like this guy. I'd really like to see some documentation for this. Yeah, me too. I'm really doubting this. So, oh yeah, this guy's funny. I forget what he said, but anyway, people like to leave interesting comments. Again, I don't think this is necessarily true, but I think it gets to a larger point. And I hope that's what you take away from this. I don't think yes, I get it. Anyway, point being, whatever people say, the larger point is that, are these rumors of $500 billion entering Bitcoin probably true? No, probably not. Maybe partially, but I even that is yet to be seen. But the bigger point is that you should realize that a $500 billion allocation is not going to be the end of it. This is just going to be the start of it. Nation states are going to realize Bitcoin is essential for their electric grid as a matter of national security. Sovereign wealth funds are going to realize that they should prioritize monetizing their Bitcoin over their oil. Diamond companies are going to realize that we should monetize Bitcoin over our diamonds. Real estate investors, stock investors are going to realize, why are we monetizing housing? Why are we making energy more expensive every year? Why are we pumping these price to earnings ratios of stocks up and to the right forever? Why they make less and less sense, where there's a price to earnings multiple of 80, 90, 95, 100, 120. These price to earnings multiples are crazy. Why are we monetizing our stocks when instead we can just monetize Bitcoin? That doesn't have earnings, that doesn't have yields, that doesn't have a CEO that could bankrupt the company at any time. People will begin to realize this is the thing we should be monetizing. And so eventually in the future, Bitcoin is just going to keep going. This price appreciation we've seen in the last few hours, people are telling me, oh, Bitcoin's going up right now because the Qataris or the Saudis or the Chinese or whomever are buying it. I don't think so, guys. I really don't think so. I look at these numbers all day, every day. I look at who's buying. I look at the hash rate. I look at where the coins are going. I don't think they're buying. Point being, if they were buying $5 billion of Bitcoin here, or $2 billion of Bitcoin there, or 50 billion over here, the price would move a lot more. Okay, the price moving right now is probably as a result of people getting excited, Bitcoin breaking past this massive resistance level psychologically. I'm not talking in trading terms. I'm just saying Bitcoin traded for many weeks at this high 30s level, and as soon as we broke 40K, then it was off to the races, and we skyrocketed from there. And that's just because it's a massive psychological level. People are emotional. They like these big numbers. That's why you clicked on this video, 500 billion. We like our big numbers. We like to see the zeros, and having a 4 in front of 4 zeros has a bigger psychological impact than having a 3 in front of those zeros, even if we've been at 40 and 50 and $60,000 in the past. So where are we going from here? I don't know. Maybe Bitcoin goes to $50,000 next. I mean, at this point, it's only like a 12% move upside, which is crazy saying. I mean, to my Canadian friends, just a couple, just to the north of me, just a couple hours north of me, they're already paying 58,000 Canadian dollars per Bitcoin. That, to me, that's just crazy. I can't believe it. Rates are still at unprecedented highs. People are still super tight on their cash. We have not had QE infinity yet. We have not begun lowering our rates yet. I mean, it's absolutely crazy that the market is still this tight, and yet we're still having these massive appreciative moments for Bitcoin. And we haven't even had the sovereign wealth funds. We haven't even had the debasement. We haven't had all these things yet. So I don't know. That's just my point. That's just my opinion on it. I just wanted to clarify a lot of this, share my perspective on that. Ultimately, if you've not taken self-custody, please do so, because all it takes is one of these sovereign wealth funds to come in and buy up all the coins. Do I think it's going to happen tomorrow? No. Do I think it's going to happen next week? No. In a year? In 5 years? 2 years? 6 months, 4 months? We have the ETF in like 35 days now. What happens if the ETF gets approved in like literally a month? I mean, lots of questions that occur here. And so if you have your coins on exchanges, or if you know somebody that has their coins on exchanges, please get them out. Take a single sig, even a hot wallet, do something, learn about it, research, learn more, watch videos and tutorials. If you want somebody to help you handhold you on how to withdraw from exchanges in a safe, easy, user-friendly way that is going to keep your coins safe, you can contact me at the Bitcoin Advisor. I know I talk about this a lot in my videos. People don't seem to understand why I do. It's because where I work here at the Bitcoin Advisor, my job is to help people take self-custody of their coins, which means that exchanges get drained faster, which means price goes up faster. So my job literally is to make Bitcoin price go up. So, if you're focused on what matters, if you're driven by your goals and your sat stacking goals, if you understand Bitcoin's more than just money, you're looking for simplicity, value, and truth, I really would highly encourage you to click the link in the description and find me at the Bitcoin Advisor. I will give you dozens of pages of free paperwork about self-custody, and you can book a free meeting with me where you can learn about self-custody. You can learn about the trade-offs to the upside and the downside for single sig as well as for multi-sig. We can talk about what your vision for the future looks like, about you stacking sats for your kids and grandkids, what an estate plan there looks like, and really bring safety to you and your portfolio. If you're looking for diversification, you're like, hey, I've got all these single sigs. I've got them around in my house, buried in my backyard, in my safe, my safety deposit box. I don't know what to do with them. It's getting stressful. And like, what happens if Bitcoin goes to $1 million overnight? Now all of a sudden I'm going to have all these millions of dollars and everyone knows that I've talked about Bitcoin. Now all of a sudden I become a big target. If you want a diversification against that, a multi-sig is probably a really good consideration for you. If you have a company or a church and you're looking for having Bitcoin on your company or church's balance sheet before it continues to become an increasing part of balance sheets for the rest of the world, multi-sig is probably a solution for you. And so if you're looking for that, the link in the description will have that. I highly encourage you to check it out because I can tell you my time's getting booked up really quick. I had 13, 14 meetings today. I've got another like 10 tomorrow, plus all the other things I got going on the side. Like, please book it now, do it now, check it out, learn more. Happy to send you those free resources. Ultimately, one way or the other, no matter who's buying, no matter when they're buying, whether it's 500 billion, 500 million, or $5, it's probably going to make a big impact for that buyer in the future. So please, first, get off zero. And second, once you've gotten off zero, please begin taking self-custody immediately. And if you need help with that, the link's in the description where you can learn more. Thanks.